Well, let's turn to KT McFarland right now. She joins us, and we're talking about this story. I'm sure you heard us, overheard us talking, KT, about the story going on in Israel, the day of mourning they had yesterday over these 3 young teen boys. What is Benjamin Netanyahu to do now that the Obama administration has said that he needs to show restraint? Why does he need to show restraint?
He ought to just ignore him. You know, if peace in the Middle East didn't happen. The Obama administration, and in fact, when Secretary Clinton took her oath of office, they said, well, we're going to have a peace deal between the Palestinians and Israel, and it should probably take us about a year to get this accomplished, and didn't work out. So Secretary Kerry comes in. He says his priority is the peace deal between Palestinians and Israel. Well, that didn't happen either. And why didn't it happen? Because there are no single Palestinians. There are 2 groups of Palestinians, one on the West Bank, one on the Gaza Strip. The one on the Gaza Strip is a terrorist group, Hamas. They're committed to the destruction of the state of Israel. So they've been negotiating with the West Bank, Fatah Palestinians, and they don't really talk about destroying Israel, but the fact of the matter is there is ultimately leading towards one Palestinian group, and that's going to be the Hamas destruction of the state of Israel. So there was never going to be a peace deal. And as a result, what does the Secretary of State do? He blames Israel.
Yeah.
You know, it makes no sense. It's more about ego. And I've thought all along that if you've got a house that's burning down and there's flooding in the yard, the one thing you don't do is redecorate the pool house.
KT, what do you think the American reaction should be? What should we do now as this has stirred up so much, again, instability and bombs are going back and forth? What should we do?
With Israel?
Yeah.
I think what we should do is take a big step back and say, wait a minute, we're about to lose the entire Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
We are about to use American oil, world oil is about to be in 2 hands, one of 2 hands, either Al-Qaeda or Iran, neither of whom have any interest in promoting the same values that we do. So the United States has to do several things. 1, get Americans out of the war zones. 2, understand that oil, world oil, and particularly American oil, is not going to come from the Middle East because they're going to blow each other's oil fields up, and they're certainly going to use oil as a weapon against us. So we better find a new place to get our oil, and that should be the United States. Understand next that terrorists are coming here, that the experienced fighters in Syria and Iraq are not only going to destroy neighboring countries to Israel and ultimately the goal of destroying Israel, but they're going to come to the United States. They've already announced that. So we better get really serious about homeland security, protecting the border, looking for terrorists and profiling for terrorist behavior, and then finally give Israel and our other allies in that region whatever they need to defend themselves. We're not doing any of those things.
KT McFarland's our guest. She's our national security analyst out of Fox News. And KT, let's pivot back up to Ukraine because everybody sort of thought that things had calmed down there. There was a 10-day ceasefire, and now that has expired. And boy, oh boy, immediately Tuesday, the violence escalated again. Artillery shells, airstrikes. Are we right back to where we were a month ago in Ukraine?
No, it's worse. I was in Ukraine earlier this month and spent a week in Kiev meeting government officials, military people, everybody. And the conclusion I reached was that the new government of Ukraine has 2 jobs. 1, to defeat a Russian invasion on its east. And secondly, and maybe even more importantly, getting their economy working again. The only way they get their economy working is loans from the West and investment from the West and cheap energy prices from Russia. They're not going to get any of those things in large part because of the massive corruption in Ukraine. So without an improved economy, I don't see how they can fight off the Russians. And at the same time, the Russians hold the one bit of leverage over Ukraine that the Middle East is going to hold over us, energy.
Now, KT, I just want to switch gears for another time. There's so much to talk to you about in foreign policy falling apart these days. So Iraq's trying to put together some sort of government, and that fell through yesterday.
Right.
Well, ISIS is taking over further and further. We'll talk about American foreign policy in Iraq right now.
Big success, huh?
Right. As we're sending more and more troops back in.
Yeah, but what are we doing? We're really just blaming. The debate in Washington is whose fault this is.
Mm-hmm.
The Republicans are blaming Obama for leaving early. Obama's blaming the Republicans for the original sin of going into Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
There is plenty of blame to go around. Both presidents have handled this abysmally. Mm-hmm. George Bush made the mistake of going in, although he did succeed in winning the Iraq War. Obama made the mistake of getting out too soon. So the question is not whose fault it is, but what do you do next, because we are where we are. I think understand these guys are going to fight each other until the oil money runs out. Both groups are wealthy. I mean, the ISIS, Al-Qaeda, has $2 billion with a B dollars behind them, money in the bank.
Wow.
And they're with an infinite source of funding, similarly to Iran, which is supporting the Iraq government. I think America should understand we couldn't stabilize that country with over 100,000 troops. We are not going to do it with 800 or whatever we're up to. So get Americans out of there and find a new place to get oil and protect the homeland and let those guys work out their problems.
All right. K.T. McFarland, thanks for joining us as always. Good to have you.
Pleasure.